Hi there. Welcome to or welcome back to Tiff Reads Books, where I read books and I talk to you about them. I have a dilemma. I am so struggling with this. I wanted to sit down and go through my top finished series of the year and rank them with you. I've only finished 12 series to completion this year. Actually feels like kind of a lot, considering a lot of them I actually started and finished this year. And I was just going through my list, trying to rank them, and the top 6 are so hard. They're so hard because there are so many things where I'm like, well, I liked this book above this book. Like, I like this book from this series more than I like this book from the other series, but what was the series overall as a whole? So that's what I'm going to talk about, is the series as a whole. And I think I've got my ranking settled, but oh my god, was it so hard. And I feel like such a traitor for where I put some of these books. Let's get into it. Okay. Like I said, I finished 12 series this year and I just wanted to rank them. I would love to be able to do a tier thing, but I need to figure out recording from my computer. I did it once and it just used up so much memory that it was very laggy. So we're gonna try again at some point. But for now, this is what we have because I filmed from my phone. So, okay. So the first series I finished this year is actually going to be my lowest ranked series of the year. In January, I finished the sequel to Silver Under Nightfall, which is Court of Wanderers, and I gave Silver Under Nightfall a 3.5, and I gave Court of Wanderers a 4. That is actually very much backwards of how most people ranked them, but I preferred Court of Wanderers. I liked the world building, I liked how the story ended. Overall, though, the series probably sits around a 3.75 to a 3.5. It's fine. Out of everything I've read from Rin Chupeco, it's probably my least favorite. So that is sitting firmly at number 12. So Silver Under Nightfall and Court of Wanderers follows a vampire hunter and 2 vampires who end up in a trio. It's polyamorous. I don't know the exact terminology for what you call that group of people where they're all with each other. And I don't want to use the wrong terminology. So this ends up being a polyamorous story with bisexual representation. And I think Rin Chupeco always does really well at representing these things. And so I like that aspect of it. The world is very dark, which I liked that aspect of it. It is inspired a little bit by Castlevania, and it did make me start watching Castlevania because I wanted to know what we were doing here. And I can see the references now that I read it. So I think for people who have read Castlevania or watched Castlevania or played the games and then read this, I can understand them being like, I wasn't a fan, because there are some like direct consistencies between the two, I guess, where you can see the character inspirations. So Remy is a vampire hunter and he ends up falling in love with these 2 vampires. I don't remember their names right now, but he kind of falls for the woman first and then has this like tense relationship with the man and ends up falling in love with him as well. And it's them like going around hunting these monstrosities and other vampires. And I really enjoyed the world building in it. There ended up in Court of Wanderers being a conversation about colonialism and like destruction of cultures and stuff, which Rin Chupeco tends to do in a lot of their books. And I enjoyed those conversations. I also enjoyed the complicated relationship that Remy had with his father, and I think that kept me intrigued a lot more in Court of Wanderers than the scenes with the trio. So I did enjoy it, but it just wasn't my top of the year. Then number 11 is a duology that I really liked. All of these I really enjoyed. Like, I did enjoy all of these. So I want to put that out there. Like, just because they're on this list doesn't mean I didn't like them. I enjoyed every series I finished this year, just some more than others. So number 11 is the Greenwood Hollow duology by Emily Tesh. This is an Achillean fantasy with a little bit of like a romance thread throughout. The first one starts off following, man, I cannot remember this guy's name, but he's a dude who lives alone in his cabin, and he ends up, it's called Silver in the Wood, and he ends up having this new guy come out and learns kind of the secrets of his past. These are novellas, so I can't really say a whole lot without spoiling it. And then the second book follows them again into something else, and there is a lot of fae energy in these. We're dealing with ancient beings and curses, and it was underneath it all kind of like a really sweet story. So I really enjoyed those. I'm gonna try to not say that for every single one. The next one I actually started again in 2023 and finished this year. So Littenverse by Nino Cipri. This is Fina and Defect. I read Fina last year. These are again both novellas, and both of them are set in an IKEA knockoff. So if you like horror store and want something that doesn't have as much like death and murder, maybe try this series. It deals with the horrors of capitalism. Fina has conversations about gender identity and relationships and what happens when they end. Then I really like that one. That was like a 5-star for me. Defect is more about individual identity and identifying yourself as an individual and figuring out who you are when you feel like you're kind of like everyone else. Again, dealing with capitalism and retail work, but didn't spark as much for me as Fina did. So I gave that one a 4. Overall, the series is a solid 4.5 to get taken together. I would read more if the author wrote more in this world. So those are 12, 11, and 10. Number 9 is the Sworn Soldier series by T. Kingfisher. I again read What Moves the Dead in 2023 and read What Feasts at Night this year, and preferred What Moves the Dead. I think What Moves the Dead felt more inspired, it felt more unique, it had a better horror line running through it. So these are horror novellas. They are following Alex, who is a sworn soldier, and they are, in the first book, going to, by invite, to their friend's manor and find their friends under some weird circumstances that brings in all of these unique characters, and it's just a good T. Kingfisher horror story. What Feasts at Night felt a little forced, I think. Having read some of T. Kingfisher's other sequels, I think this one felt a little forced, and I was a little less excited about it, but I did overall enjoy the story. We get less of some of the characters in this one and focus more on Alex and what Alex is going through with the haunting aspect in this one, and we get a little bit more world building. So again, solid series, but didn't go, oh wow, for me, like What Moves the Dead did. Number 8, I contemplated leaving off this list because it's not technically a series, it's a prequel and a book, but they were written far enough apart that I do think you could count this as a series, and that is the Rolling in the Deep series, which features the novella Rolling in the Deep and the novel Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. I read Into the Drowning Deep first and absolutely loved it. I was hooked. I needed more, so I picked up Rolling in the Deep, which is a novella of what happened before the events, so a prequel. It was written beforehand. I think if you read these books, if you have not read Rolling in the Deep, don't read it till after you read Into the Drowning Deep, because you're gonna get a bigger impact of the end if you aren't aware of what is actually happening by reading Rolling in the Deep. So this follows a research vessel that go out to find out what happened to a previous research vessel that was actually an entertainment trip, pretending that they had found mermaids in the Mariana Trench and at the Challenger Deep specifically. And then when the second vessel goes out, a whole bunch of stuff happens, and it was just a really good ensemble cast with a lot of diversity and some really solid storylines, and I loved the science of it. I need more biological science fiction. Like, I need more of that. That was so good. The horror aspect of it was fantastic. Mira Grant and Seanan McGuire, fantastic writing. Number 7 was a surprise for me, and this is the Saint of Steel series by T. Kingfisher. I just did a longer video talking about this, but this is a romantasy series following all of these different paladins who have had their saint die, and just following them as they are healed and fall in love. And we also investigate dark fantasy horror lines throughout the series. So again, it's classic T. Kingfisher. It's so good. This, I am including Sword Heart in this, which you don't have to read, but Sword Heart comes first chronologically, and I do think it's worth the read. It's probably my favorite of them. So I say it's my favorite, but I gave it a little lower of a rating. I would probably re-rate it higher now, if I went back and reread it. So in order, I have Swordheart at 4.5, Paladin's Grace at a 4, Paladin's Strength at a 4.75. That is definitely my favorite. Paladin's Hope at a 4.5, and Paladin's Faith also at a 4.5. Paladin's Faith is interesting. I did just talk about it, but I liked the storyline more than I liked the romance in that one. So where in Paladin's Strength, I liked the story and the romance. So take that what you will. All right, top 6. As I said, the top 6 are a challenge because these are all 5-star series as a whole. Every single one of these, I didn't want to put it down. I didn't want it to end. I wanted to read more in this world. Lucky for me, a lot of them have more in their worlds, and I can keep reading stuff. So this was very difficult, but I did put the Indian Lake trilogy at number 6. This is Stephen Graham Jones following Jade, who is a girl who just loves horror, and she thinks a slasher film is starting in her small town. And we follow her through many years of her life. She starts the book at 16 and ends the last book in her almost 30, I believe. Or because I think each book is almost 10 years apart or something. I think it's 5 years and then another 6 years or something like that. But reading each of these books, I was like, oh my God, Stephen, can you stop throwing things at this girl and just let her have a break? Just let her have a break. I have never cried so much at a horror book than I did at My Heart is a Chainsaw. And that sealed it for me that Stephen Graham Jones is an author I'm going to keep reading. My Heart is a Chainsaw was a 5. Don't Fear the Reaper was a 4.5 because it had an ensemble cast instead of just Jade. And I think if it had just Jade, I would have preferred it. And he mentioned in his acknowledgements that he got a lot of comments about that when in the acknowledgements for the last book in the series, which was The Angel of Indian Lake. And I gave that one a 5. I thought it was a really solid finish to a really good story. Number 5, I went back and forth on this one for a while. This is gonna have to be the First Law series. And I think it's just because I don't know what it is about it, just didn't hit the same way as the number 4 book, as the number 4 series for me. So the First Law series is really hard to explain because this is a book where nothing kind of happens in the first book. It's all set up, it's all character introduction, which I really enjoyed, but it's very hard for me to go, okay, here's the plot, because there isn't really a lot of plot. It's my character introduction. And again, this is an ensemble cast. And I did, at the end, really love this and go, I am going to continue reading in this world with this author. Hands down, Joe Abercrombie writes some amazing scenes. His battle scenes are really good. His inner monologues are great. His commentaries on society are fantastic. And this is all grimdark. Each and every one of these characters is terrible. And I kept going, oh my God, Joe, stop making me like these terrible men, because these men are terrible. I don't want to feel bad for them. And here I am feeling fucking bad for them. So I did give The Blade Itself, which is the first book, I gave it a 4.5. I thought it was missing something for me. And then Before They Are Hanged was a 5, easy. And the very last book, The Last Argument of Kings, was a 5 as well. I did not expect the ending, and I am so excited of how it ended. It was perfect. It was definitely perfect. Okay, so then the Farseer trilogy is number 4. And again, I went back and forth on was the Farseer better or worse, but I think the Farseer hooked me a bit more in book 1 because the book 1s of both of these were 4.5 stars. So The Assassin's Apprentice and The Blade Itself were 4.5 stars, and I was really unsure. But Burrich is what settled it for me, that I just liked Burrich so much better than I liked my favorite character in First Law. And my favorite character in First Law was Glokta, which I know, and Dogman. I love Dogman, but he wasn't really a very standout in the first book. But in the first book, so if I'm just comparing those two to decide where it ranks, Burrich is... You can't deny Heart of the Pack. You can't. So I read this series as part of Literary Diversion's Fits Along, and I am so glad I decided to jump in and do it, because Robin Hobb is now in my top favorite authors. Like, I will read this woman's grocery list. I swear to God, I'm going to keep reading everything she writes. And I have so much of a backlist. I'm so excited that I have so much of a backlist. So the Farseer trilogy follows Fitz, who's an orphan, bastard son of the king, and gets given to the stable master to raise. And the stable master has only ever raised horses and puppies, and so he's like, well, how hard can it be? It's gonna be kind of like a horse or a puppy. And he does his best. He does his very best. And Fitz eventually gets tapped to be the next royal poisoner, essentially. So the assassin's apprentice. Fitz is very much a black licorice character. You either hate him or you love him. There is no in between. You cannot be neutral on Fitz. And I love him as much as I find him very annoying and I wanted to shake him a lot. But he is young in this book. He starts at 16 and he ends at like 18 or 19. Everything happens for him over the course of like 3 years. And I can't judge him for being a whiny little bitch when he's a teenager. Like, I really can't, because I was also a whiny little bitch as a teenager who also made absolutely terrible choices. And there are other reasons too why Fitz makes terrible choices. So I can't judge him. He needed a parent, not a stable master. But Burrage did his best, and I love Burrage so much. So I will continue to love Burrage for the rest of my life. So number 3 is definitely Kushiel's Legacy, Phaedra's trilogy. It's the first trilogy in this world. There is a second trilogy called Kushiel's Legacy as well, and that follows after the events of this one. So I will be continuing those next year, I think. I just needed it was so much and so good that I needed to like breathe from it, or I was just gonna get consumed by it. So this is an OG fantasy. I keep seeing it referred to as the original Romantasy, and I disagree. For one, the Dragon Riders of Pern is older and has more romance in it from what I've told. I haven't read it yet. But there isn't romance. It's not a romance in the first book. Like, a romance requires, I guess overall it has a happy ending. A romance requires a happy ending, but I wouldn't call them romances. The main plot of the book is not the romance. The main plot of the book is the political intrigue. I have seen a TikTok recently from the author herself who's calling it a romance fantasy. So if she wants to call it that, maybe it is. But I think if you're a romantasy girly, I don't know if you'd like these, because there is a lot of political intrigue. Phaedra is a high-end sex worker. She works for a lot of nobles. We start off following her at a young age, and so that could be a problem for a lot of people. She's not doing sex work until she's 16, which is an adult in this world. And it's all about consent, and it does get a little dark in places, but those events are incredibly consensual. So keep that in mind if you do go into this series. But she is trained, because she's also an orphan, and she is trained at a young age to be a spy, and basically trained for that through her knowledge of observation. She's an incredibly smart character. She gets all of the attention that I wish Fitz had gotten, because she ends up in a place that worked out very well for her. She has this unique curse or blessing, however you want to look at it, that she experiences pain as intense pleasure. And so that makes her very desirable by a lot of interesting people. And it gets her into a lot of trouble. The main thing that I never see talked about this book is this has incredible bisexual representation for the 1990s / early 2000s. I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s. But this book has Phaedra's motivation through most of it is this intense fascination and love that she has for a woman in this book. And I don't want to say too much more about that because it gets into spoilers, but there is bisexual representation in this book. And for the era that it was published in, I'm amazed at how well it was done without judgment and without it ever being a problem to anybody around her. So, appreciated that. It goes into some dark topics. The last book was not my favorite, but I like how the story ended regardless. So I gave Kushiel's Dart a 5, Kushiel's Chosen a 5, and Kushiel's Avatar a 4. It was not my favorite, but I do like what it did in the end. Some of those scenes in there were very hard to listen to as well, because I listened to it on audio and the voice actor is really good. And she had me like sobbing while walking the dog. So, okay, number 2. Again, number 1 and number 2, I went back and forth on so much. And the key came down to which one I actually did a reread of this year. That's what it came down to. So number 2 is the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne. And I am so happy I picked these up. I again read all of these in this year. So all of the series from 6 down, I read this year, and in the span of very little months. So the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne, it follows 3 main characters, and it follows them over the course of a couple of years, or a year. I think it's only a year. We follow Orca, whose son... What the fuck is with the cars today? Orca's son is stolen in the beginning of the book, and she's trying to hunt him down. And then we're following Varg, who is an escaped thrall, and thralls are slaves in this world, like they're enslaved through a thing of magic. And then we're following Elvar, who is, she just wants some battle fame. Like that, she's just a teenage girl who wants to be a badass. And we're following all of them in their arcs that all end up doing this. So I really enjoyed it for that. I think it twines the arcs together very, very well. There was a little bit of rockiness in the first book. It was a 4 for me because the writing style felt a little rough, but it felt like he really settled into his writing style of this series, because I know he's written things before this, but it felt like it took him a minute to like settle into his world, and he really did that in book 2. And book 3 is probably, if I were to rank my books individually, one of my top books of the year. I cried so many times in that book. And I think the way that he examines grief and loss and family and found family is so amazing. I have not read found family better than I have read in this book. Like, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. That's a little ridiculous. So I really, really recommend this series. It was something unique. It's also, the rest of these in the top are kind of set in a medieval Europe. This one is Norse in its inspiration, which was kind of a change that I enjoyed. Okay. It's with the cars today. Okay, my number 1 series this year is the Live Ship Traders. It has to be. I reread Ship of Magic. Or not Ship of Magic. I reread The Mad Ship because I loved it so much. I only reread that one. I didn't reread any of the other ones. I just reread that one. So I devoured this series. I read all 3 of these books in the month of June, and I was reading them as part of Literary Diversions Fits Along. We were only supposed to read The Mad Ship. And my overenthusiastic ass got obsessed and plowed through all of them in the span of a month. My June reading statistics for audio are like, it's so high. Because these are long books. These are like 33 hours a piece, and I read all of them in 1 month. And like, I was obsessed. I could not stop. I was like walking around the house doing chores, listening to it. I was like listening. I was in the car a lot that month, but I was doing everything I could to listen to this book, like just obsessively, because these are so good. So this is an ensemble cast. And that's where I think it breaks from the Farseer trilogy by being an ensemble, and that made it stand out to me. I think it was the first like really good ensemble cast that I read this year, and I was like, oh, actually, I really like how this is done. And it was just, it follows this family of traders as well as a pirate, and as well as another family of traders from a different region, and then we get some nobles from another region. We just get all these people whose lives are all enmeshed with each other and who are all dealing with some heavy stuff. We deal a lot with grief and with loss and with ownership and with like finding out who you are. We also get this amazing dragon lore that ties into all of the questions that I had from the Farseer trilogy about the dragons in there were answered in this one. We even get perspective of the dragon, and we get also at the very end, and we also get perspective of the sea serpents that are in this book. So a lot of people I found out don't like the sea serpents perspective. I loved it. I loved Malkin's Tangle. Like I lived and breathed for those like sea serpent interludes. I think the story itself wrapped up pretty well, and I think Robin Hobb kind of struggles a little bit with endings as far as I can tell, having read 6 of her books this year. I think her endings are always a little loosey-goosey, and this one actually I think ended pretty well. So I there has never been so many characters that I've been obsessed with as I was in this book. Like, one of the live ships is named Ophelia, and I walked around the house singing, I think it's the Lumineers.
Oh, Ophelia, you've been on my mind, girl, like a drug.
Like, over and over and over again. I couldn't stop. So every time she was on, like, I was like enjoying myself in the car so much, like reading these books. Absolute obsession. So it had to be number one, because as much as I loved John Gwynn's books, it did not become my personality like this series did. Where I'm still obsessed, and I can't wait to reread them next year. I'm looking for them physically because I like to buy my books used, but I may give in and just buy a new set just so I can read it and annotate it, because I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. I bought myself I have my Gideon shirt, right? But I bought myself a Vestrit Trading Co. sweatshirt from Flowers and Fantasy Co. And I bought myself a Wolves Have No Kings sweater. But you know what I find, or hoodie, but you know what I find myself wearing more? That Vestrit Trading Co. crew neck. Obsessed. Absolutely fucking obsessed. So that is my series breakdown. I really, you know what, maybe this weekend I will talk to you about the Live Ship Traders. At some point, I need to talk to you about the Live Ship Traders, because oh boy, am I fucking obsessed, or am I fucking obsessed? Like, talking about it right now, I'm like, I want to go back and reread it, like, right now. Like, girl, you've got shit to do. So anyway, those are my top series that I finished this year. And let me know what some of your top series of the year is. I knew I could do this video now because I'm not going to be finishing any more series before the year ends. So I knew I could rank this one now, and get some of that excitement, because I'm watching everyone else's year-end videos. I'm like, I want to do year-end, but I'm still reading, so I don't want to end anything yet. So maybe I'll have to take a page from books like Woe and start doing a like December to November type wrap-up, where like she does, so that I can talk about end of the year things. Because man, I want to be part of the club, because I'm having like so much fun watching everyone else's stuff. So if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. I'm going to be doing a lot more stuff in the next week or so, and just to finish out my year and talk about what I want to do next year. So thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you soon.